2:30 a.m., Frank Olson crashed through the window of his 13th floor hotel room in New York City. The CIA said he jumped. They called it a suicide, just a troubled man buckling under pressure. Frank's family had no choice but to believe it, at least at first. But as the years passed, the cracks in the story widened. And what slipped through those cracks? That's the real story, the darker one. Frank Olson wasn't just another government scientist. He was a biochemist at Fort Detrick, one of the most secretive military labs in the United States. For years, Olson worked at the heart of America's biological and chemical warfare programs. He designed weapons that didn't just kill, they erased people silently, without a trace. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Olson started to question what he was a part of. What triggered the change? Some point to a trip he took to Europe in 1952. It was no vacation. Olson was sent by the CIA to observe interrogation techniques at black sites, secret prisons where the rules didn't apply. Near Berlin, he watched a prisoner strapped to a table and injected with an experimental drug. The man convulsed violently, foaming at the mouth, until he stopped breathing. Olson had seen death before, but not like this. Not so cold, not so calculated. He returned home different. His wife, Alice, noticed it first. He was quiet, withdrawn, haunted. And what haunted him wasn't just what he saw, but what he helped create. Olson began voicing doubts. He talked about leaving the program. He said he wanted to go public. That's when things got dangerous. Because Olson wasn't just in the loop, he was deep in it. He had clearance for MK-Ultra, the CIA's secret mind control program. He knew about the use of LSD on unwitting subjects, the psychological torture, the human experiments. And if he talked, the entire house of cards could fall. There's something else, something that didn't make the official reports. In August 1950, the U.S. Army quietly planned a biological warfare test in the New York City subway. A declassified FBI memo later confirmed the plan existed, but claimed it was indefinitely postponed. But that wasn't true. Dr. Henry Eigelsbach, one of Olson's colleagues, later said the test did happen, just on a smaller scale. A chemical agent was released into the subway during rush hour to monitor how far it would spread. The results? Still classified. And then there's what happened in France. August 1951. A quiet village in southern France called Pont-Saint-Esprit suddenly descended into madness. Over 250 residents were hospitalized with terrifying hallucinations. One man thought snakes were eating his stomach from the inside. Others jumped from buildings, convinced they were being hunted by demons. 7 people died. The official explanation? Ergot poisoning. Rye bread contaminated with a toxic fungus. But there's a theory that never made it into the public narrative. Ergot is chemically related to LSD. And Olson? He was in Europe at the time. Some believe Pont-Saint-Esprit wasn't an accident at all, but an MK-Ultra experiment. A live test of psychoactive warfare on an unsuspecting population. By 1953, Olson was spiraling. He confided in Alice again, this time more directly. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. That he was involved in something evil. That he wanted out. But you don't just leave the CIA. Especially not when you know the kind of secrets Olson did. So they watched him. And they waited. On November 19, 1953, Olson was invited to a retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. It was hosted by Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA's LSD guru and the head of MK-Ultra. There was alcohol, conversation, trust. And then came the betrayal. Olson's drink was spiked with LSD. The excuse? They were testing the effects of the drug on agency personnel. But Olson wasn't just any subject. He was the target. They wanted to see what he'd do, whether he'd break. He did. Over the next few days, Olson became unhinged. He was paranoid, confused, talking about quitting, about confessing, about what he'd seen, about what they'd done. The CIA grew concerned. He was unraveling fast, and he knew too much. They decided he needed help, or so they claimed. Olson was flown to New York and checked into the Statler Hotel under the pretense of receiving psychiatric treatment from Dr. Harold Abramson, a doctor with ties to the CIA and MK Ultra. Also in the room, Robert Lashbrook, Olson's handler and another agency man. On November 28th, Olson died. The official report said he jumped, but when police questioned Lashbrook, he seemed oddly detached. They found him sitting silently on the toilet, hands in his lap. He claimed Olson had leapt without warning, but there was no note, no scream, no struggle. And later, much later, the story began to fall apart. In 1975, during the Rockefeller Commission's investigation into CIA abuses, the truth finally surfaced. Olson had been secretly dosed with LSD by his own colleagues just days before his death. President Gerald Ford even invited Olson's family to the White House to offer a formal apology. But it wasn't the whole truth. Behind closed doors, the government offered the Olson family a $1.25 million settlement to avoid a lawsuit. But as negotiations dragged on, the offer was reduced to $750,000. The family accepted, on the condition they drop all legal action. The case was closed, or so they thought. In 1994, the Olson family ordered a second autopsy. What they found was chilling. The injuries on Frank's body didn't match a fall. There were no lacerations or broken bones consistent with crashing through a glass window. But there was a large blunt force injury to the skull, one that appeared to have occurred before the fall. The conclusion? Frank Olson had been knocked unconscious, then thrown out the window. It wasn't suicide. It was murder. And no one was ever charged. The government never reopened the case. The CIA never admitted wrongdoing. Frank Olson, one of the most informed scientists in America's Black Ops history, became a warning, a ghost. How many others were silenced like him? How many secrets are still buried? We may never know the full truth. What we do know is that Frank Olson's death is one of many questions that have been quietly swept away, buried beneath layers of secrecy and government denial. And for Olson, as for countless others, the truth was just another casualty of a system willing to erase anyone who threatens its darkest secrets.